Cameras out.
Oh, I know the camera's out. That's for you.
Gotcha. Hey, fans, we are live with another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. And I am very pleased tonight to welcome a man who has had quite the career in the professional wrestling business. He's a man who's had a very successful tenure in WWE, TNA, and other locations that we'll get to. That would be the one, the only PopeElijah Burke. Pope, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you for having me on. And for the listeners out there, I want to be very clear and transparent with you. If you're not seeing your boy, that's because Pope, in all of his busyness, if you will, forgot about the interview. Well, they didn't forget about the interview, but certainly got caught up on time, and I'm sitting inside of my car. And if anybody be a fan of Pope, you know Pope just can't be on looking any type of way. So, but I'm here, and I'm here. We're gonna have some fun, and we're gonna let my guy Jack do what he does.
Well, I appreciate that, and the fans that are very familiar with your work as well can certainly appreciate that. I wanted to ask you though, right off the hop, growing up, I know you have an athletic background and a number of accolades to your name in that regard. But growing up, were you a fan of professional wrestling per se? And if so, what territories or companies did you follow?
Per se, man. Listen, you're not dealing with this new generation to where they just all of a sudden, because they see what they see on television, no history about it, but they see the galore, the glamour, and the spectacle that is some of the premier events in wrestling today. You're not dealing with that. You're dealing with someone who grew up right here in Jacksonville, Florida, who grew up watching championship wrestling from Florida, grew up watching the NWA on WTBS every Saturday morning, sitting at my daddy's foot, if you will. As he sat on the recliner, we had to sit on the floor and we watched our favorite professional wrestlers do what they do. So you're talking to someone that grew up in it. I knew from a very young age that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional wrestler. We will often mimic professional wrestling, not to the extent of backyard wrestling, but we certainly thought that we would live out our fantasies as kids in our front yard. You there? How do we lose him?
No, you didn't lose me. I just went off camera for a second. Did you have a particular wrestler
Oh,
or
okay, just checking.
yeah, no worries. Did you have a particular wrestler or wrestlers that inspired you as a youngster? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Come again.
Sorry, I just asked you. Given your fandom as a youngster, did you have a particular wrestler or wrestlers that inspired you growing up?
Absolutely. If you're in the wrestling game, you better. If you don't, then you shouldn't be in it. But certainly, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and I think a lot of you who have followed Pope's career know the importance of the dream when it comes
Hmm.
to Elijah Burke, when it comes to the Pope himself. It was always about Dusty. It was everything Dusty for me. Dusty Rhodes was the closest thing as a kid that we had to a black man that was actually relevant and a champion. So, yes, we had the Rocky Kings, the Big Cat, Ernie Lash. Yes, we had Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, which was before my time a little bit. But
Hmm.
certainly we did not have someone that looked like me, that was world champion material, that was a world champion, presented in such a way that talked a certain style that was reminiscent to what I was familiar with. All those things came to be with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. So when he reached out to that television and he said, "Your hand touching my hand," look, man, I was running to that television screen like that little girl from Poltergeist.
Hmm. Hmm. Excellent. A fan is asking, Little Bindi is asking, hello, Pope. How did you take the loss when Big Viscera passed away in 2013, Mr. Fraser?
That was a very rough time for Pope, because me and Vince, we were speaking more then, staying in touch more then, uh, than we were when we were with WWE. Uh, we had a great friendship. He was a big brother, I mean, really a big brother, good guy. And I was with Impact Wrestling in the commentating role at that time, so he had already talked, and had been floating ideas to bring him in, to have him be Pope's bodyguard, even if it just was him standing behind me at the desk because of the Tyrus connection. So yeah, when it hit me, when that happened, it hit me very hard. I never ever knew Big Vis to be in a bad mood. He was always just a funny, uh, big big baby, but a big teddy bear, man. He had a good heart.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, and gone way too soon. When you were in OVW, I read somewhere that it at least this is what the internet says, and we all know that that can be reliable or not. That you were setting it on fire in OVW when it was developmental, and you were according to Mr. Chad Tolan, you were offered a spot on the main roster as one of the Spirit Squad. Is that true? And if so, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, that's not according to Chad Tolan. I'm putting that out, and I don't know where y'all got it from, but yeah, that's very accurate. Um, During the time, Pope was Elijah Burke, of course, and I was getting over big time, and Vince brought us up, myself, Ken Doan, Nick Nemeth, and Mitch McConnell. Not Mitch McConnell. What's
Mitch McConnell.
Mitch? I don't
That's a
remember
good
Mitch.
one.
I don't
Yeah, yeah,
remember Mitch's
Mitch.
last name, but Mitch. He brought us up there, and Vince pulled us in his office. We had a sitting down meeting with Vince, and he said, "Look, I was on my jet, and I was trying to think of the next big thing that would get heat. I wanted to get some heat." And he was basically saying he came up with the idea of the Spirit Squad, male cheerleaders. And he told us it was going to make a lot of money, and they did. But Vince was also, as he is today, he would ask you to do anything that he wouldn't do, and he wouldn't ask you to do anything that you were not comfortable doing. So if you're uncomfortable with it, or if I don't want you to do something that you are uncomfortable with. Well, I was uncomfortable with it, and I chose not to do it, and he respected that 100%. I believe I got more respect from Vince by saying no than I would have by saying yes and going out there and not being able to fully commit to the gimmick. But those guys made a lot of money, and by way of me saying no, I opened the door for two more people to go up there. Instead of it being four, it wound up being five, thus being Mike Mondo and Johnny Jeter, who was well deserving, both of those guys. That was their ticket out of OVW, and they had been there well before I got there.
Hmm.
So
So,
kudos to them.
so when you finally came up in 2006, I remember this well. You were part of a package with Sylvester Turkai in an MMA cornerman type of deal. What were your thoughts on this presentation creatively at the time?
I thought it was great. They had no idea necessarily when we came up what we were doing. That iconic, I certainly consider iconic outfit, or
Mm.
legendary. I can go that far. Outfit that myself and Turkow wore. That was done on the spot. So we were brought up into, we're going to do this, but we didn't have no vignettes. We didn't have months of build up. We didn't have anything. We just debuted. We just one day we just there. We went out there, and luckily enough, they had sent a runner out to get those legendary outfits that myself and Turkai, the jumpsuits that we wore. That was put together on the spot. That was a very good pairing, if you will, as far as I'm concerned, because I love Turkai. I thought he was a great guy because I traveled with him, obviously. And he didn't quite get his fair shake for a number of reasons, but I love the pairing. I was excited about it and the possibilities of where we could have went.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what led to that pairing getting cut short. But when you first came up, did you have any uh, misgivings in terms of how you were going to be presented, or did you have input into your initial creative?
Yeah, everything you saw, I was doing. When I would walk out and I would say, Sylvester, Kai, all of that is me. I'm the one that built them from Big Bear, California. Where the hell is Big Bear, California? I don't know, but I'm the one that came up with that. And they just followed along with it. So I had a little creative freedom, and that was uh, more so to the fact that I was working under my mentor, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. So that was all good. I had no misgivings whatsoever. They were they had ideas for Turkai. Turkai was supposed to be going to Mania of 23. They were going to build him for the Undertaker. That's the whole purpose. That was the whole point.
Hmm. And what went wrong there? Because I share your view that he was an exceptional talent that certainly translated to the fans as being a legit individual.
And that was the problem. He was legit. So it was kind of hard for someone to be a legit MMA fighter, and you got people telling him, "Be that guy, be that guy, be that guy." But then to be that guy, you know, you still have to work it. And I think that at times when you got so many agents in a guy like Turkai's ear, be believable or it's not believable enough, and he's out there with destroying folks. After a while, I think that people are going to say, "Hey, let me wrestle the guy that's with him." I don't know. I can't say that to be fact, but I can certainly say that a lot of people knew that they were in the ring with Turkai once it was over.
Hmm. You and Turkai were part of that infamous ECW pay-per-view December to Dismember, where you took on the FBI, and shout out to Nunzio, who recently competed for Great North Wrestling. That match I thought was quite good, but the buzz around the pay-per-view, at least the historical accounting of it, was that it was very chaotic and what's the word?
A
Chaotic.
flop.
Yeah, which quite honestly, at the time, I enjoyed it. Maybe I was one of the few. But what was your impressions of the atmosphere in that pay per view and your own match, and what went wrong? I guess.
I don't think anything went wrong. You go back and you look at the pay per view; it's a good pay per view. I don't understand why it received uh, the connotation of being a flop or not a very good pay per view. It may not have been a very good pay per view in the system. Okay, let's back up. If that pay per view draws 300,000 buys, no one is talking about that today. No one is going to be talking about it being a flop or it's not a good pay per view, this, that, or the other, because it'll be reflected upon differently. But also, it'll be reflected upon by the action that took place and the matches that took place. So, granted, I do agree that it was chaotic. I do agree that um, a lot of the matches didn't have any build. So that was part of the problem. But when you go back and you watch and you just look at the action, they're good matches. I can't really think of a bad match that is
Hmm.
on it. So
Hmm.
I think with the history and everything that was going on with Paul Heyman at the time and his battle with the upper brass of WWE management. I think all of that plays a part into, it being an infamous event at this day and age.
What was your personal, professional relationship like with Paul Heyman at the time? And did you sense the tension that we've read about in the sheets about that particular day? Because I guess it led to Paul walking out with Vince McMahon.
Paul didn't walk out. What do you mean by
Well,
walking out?
well, apparently he quit after that pay per view.
Paul didn't quit. Paul was sent home and down to OVW.
Okay.
Yeah. What's at the time? 2006. Or was he already down there? I'm trying to make sure I have my time right, but no, Paul didn't quit. Paul, from my understanding, Paul was sent to work from home, and he did. How do I know that? Because Dave Lagana was under Paul's tutelage, and the show was still being written via Paul Heyman through Dave Lagana, or at least when it comes to certain people, CM Punk, and the list goes on. So yeah. So
Mhm.
Paul Heyman, while he may not have been there, it gave Dave Lagana the chance to ascend up into the position where he was, and his ideals when it came to certain people and certain aspects of the ECW show was still being ran through Paul Heyman.
Gotcha. Did you see or witness any of the alleged tension between him and Vince, or is that
Uh,
overblown?
no, the frustrations of Paul Heyman, well, that was very accurate. That was apparent, but witnessing him and Vince going at it, no, nobody is backstage going at it with Vince like that. And if they are, they won't walk out. They'll be escorted out. They won't walk out into their own will. They'll be escorted out. So I don't. I've
Mhm.
never. And some people have had that, but they better be top drawing stars. They better be like the Stone Cold and the Brock Lesnar. I've never heard of anybody else that is backstage throwing a fit with Vince and then leave and come back as they choose. That I don't see that happening, and I never witnessed that happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we spoke off air, you were a big part of the new breed storyline versus the ECW originals, which culminated at WrestleMania 23 at in Ford Field, where I had the pleasure of being in attendance. What when this was presented to you, what were your initial thoughts, and do you think that it's accurate, the record that talks about Vince McMahon's disdain for the original ECW, given that the originals went over in that match, if memory serves me correctly?
Oh, then there you go. So it couldn't be too much of a disdain. I wish it was that way because then I could have a win at WrestleMania. So
Hmm.
it couldn't have been Vince hating him too much. He obviously they put us together to be the new breed again, another Dusty Rhodes creation. But they had the originals to go over. Was it the right thing to do? Probably so. But if the New Breed was going to be the face of the new ECW, then probably the New Breed should have went over. But the point is, uh, everything gets ran by and through Vince. Vince gave these guys their moment. So if he hated them that much, certainly Tommy Dreamer would have been a prominent fixture in the ECW, the new one, as well as Sandman. Vince is all about money, and we all know at this point that Vince could hate somebody, but if that person can make him money, then he can put hate, disdain, and anything else aside to move forward in a business relationship that's beneficial to the bottom line of his company.
Do you think after Mania, and again, if memory is serving me incorrectly, I apologize, but do you think with the dropping of that angle after Mania, do you think there was more gas in the tank there, and it could have,
Definitely.
yeah, it could have been used to elevate the new breed, because it was kind of a head scratcher from a fan's perspective why it just kind of dropped off.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to have more time at WrestleMania. WrestleMania 23, the second largest crowd in history at that time in Detroit, behind WrestleMania 3. So we were supposed to have more time, and it got cut. So they gave us that time back on that following ECW, TV following Mania. So we were able to go out there and now have the match that's often talked about, raved about. That match where Sabu goes through the table at the end with the Elijah Express, and we pick
Mhm.
up the victory. We were all ecstatic. The backstage was, ecstatic in an uproar, and everybody was just super happy with the match. And we went out there and we basically showed them what we could have done at WrestleMania had we had been given the opportunity. So we all kind of went into that match with a little chip on our shoulder, being that our match was cut at Mania. But when you're at the bottom of the card, or so to speak, you're low on the totem pole. That happens quite often. So you
Mhm.
just go with it.
So one of the noteworthy introductions in terms of the WWE ECW was the emergence of CM Punk and his rise in the company. When you started working with him, were you surprised that he went as far as he did in WWE?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was more surprised that he made it through the through the pigeonhole of sorts that was, or I'll just say through the barriers that was placed in front of him, um, by upper management. History tells us that, from the Shawns to the Triple H and Vance, and the list goes on. You got this, they would call him skinny fat or whatever the word they would use for him, and the way he looked and how his body was. And, we know how they felt about him. But somehow he was still able to break through. Why was he able to break through in such a manner that he was? No takeaway from the guy's talent, but he had one guy behind him. He had one guy behind him, and that's the guy that we previously talked about,
Paul.
Paul Heyman. And Paul was the difference maker. So there was no surprise there.
Are you do you I'm assuming that you pay attention to AEW and
Of course.
Punk's ups and downs in that company. Do you think uh you know hopefully this run, this latest run will be what I think he wanted it to be, but were you surprised at how the first go around turned out and all that controversy with the media scrum, etc.?
No, I wasn't, because that's Phil. That's who he is. So no, I wasn't surprised at that one bit. I was probably more surprised. I was probably more surprised that he, in that manner, just said "F it." He didn't care. But no, that's exactly. You can see that he was frustrated, and a lot of us can, you know draw our own, correlation as to why. But personally, from knowing Punk, being around him, wrestling him for the years that I did, that is exactly that's who he is. When in the position to do such a thing, and he came in AEW as the guy. So when they brought him in as the guy, he is in the position. If he's in that position to do it, then he's certainly going to take full advantage of it, and that's what he did, because he's the guy. So I wasn't surprised at all.
And more to come. A fan on social media sent me a question regarding in June 2007, and I do remember this match, of course. You had a really excellent TV match with Chris Benoit, which happened to be his final match ever. Is there anything that stands out from this experience other than from himself, or anything other than it seemed to be a really snug and basically flawless performance from both?
Um, Memory of that, everything was on the go. Everything was off the fly on live television. Oftentimes, myself and CM Punk as well. A match that I'm very proud of. I'm very. I reflect back on fondly. I was really looking forward to working with Chris. Chris came over to ECW and he pulled me aside, took me in the stands, says, "You're the guy that I'm going to be working with. I want to know who I can help elevate." Everybody said, "You, I'm here for you." And so I was looking forward to what was to come with Chris Benoit. Uh, I have nothing prior to that night but fond memories of Chris. And yeah, it was a good time. I worked in that whole loop prior to that television, you know, from Georgia to North Carolina. But it was a good match, man. It was a learning experience. I learned a lot, and yeah, it's sad the way everything ended.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you seem to be cutting your own path. You're in several high profile positions in the company. What led to your departure? And I've got it down as 2008, if that's correct.
Yeah, somewhere around there, going in 2009, I can't remember, but I was on. I think I had a sprained ankle. I never suffered a serious injury, but I was out. I was out, and I was trying to. Since I was out, I didn't want to. I knew I was going to be out for a minute. Not for like half a year or anything, but I knew I was going to be out for some months, and being out of the rotation, that means that you lose your spot. You lose whatever momentum you had. It was at that time that I started pitching Pope for my comeback. I wanted to be, I wanted to have a change. I didn't want to just be Elijah Burke. I um, had this idea for this character, and I knew that it was going to be money. And I started presenting it to him, and it was like, yeah, we'll get to it, and we'll get to it. And we finally got to where I could do a backstage uh, vignette or something to that effect, where they get to see what I'm trying to present to them. And basically, the idea of who the Black Pope would be was not the idea of what I originally came up with. And I get that the WWE take your ideas and they'll make it their own. I get all of that. But it's like, yo, Pope is not a televangelist. This is not a spiritual thing, a religious thing. It's only the only connection to religion is probably the name itself. So I didn't want to go out there and be a Reverend Slick or a Brother Love or a Deacon Batista, and the list goes on. I wanted to go out there and be Pope, the same Pope that you guys will come to know at TNA. And so that was, uh, I believe that was probably the time right after that. I couldn't be the televangelist guy. I don't believe mixing religion. People want to, some people are cool with that, but if people want to go to church, I doubt they'll come to wrestling. They'll go to a doggone church building. They'll go to a NAS or wherever they want to go. Don't nobody want to escape their daily life and be listening to somebody telling them about hellfire and brimstone. So it was at that point, the pushback, that we knew that we weren't going to be on the same page.
And then you debuted in TNA with for your first run with the new or the Pope persona. In terms of
It got
that,
over. It got over immediately.
yes, yeah,
No build up, no vignettes,
mhm.
dry. Show up and Pope is pimping from the first day he sets foot in the Impact Arena. No online backing. Nobody knew until they saw it, and it was over immediately.
And I know it's hard given that first run, but there was probably never a more robust and talented roster in TNA than that period of time till about 2012ish, 2009, 2012ish, that 3 or 4 year period. You had so many great matches and opponents there. Can you narrow down your favorites per se?
Um, I'll say my favorite feuds. It's because there's so many, but AJ Styles, obviously, Samoa Joe, obviously, and Devon. When I did that, that's probably my favorite, just because of what it was. And we actually got a lot of time, and we had the vignettes, just a story that was there with me taking the sons and becoming their daddy. So yeah, certainly the Devon storyline was probably one of my favorites. But my opponents in the ring, certainly AJ Styles and even Suicide, aka Cass. I just enjoyed those.
And you were there when Hogan and Bischoff came into the company, and they had a great TV deal with Spike, and there were really high hopes that TNA would expand on that platform and become a very strong number two to WWE. Do you have any thoughts as to why that ultimately didn't occur?
Well, it did actually. It's just that the money wasn't reflecting it because Hogan took a big chunk of the change, you know.
Mm,
Everybody was complaining about the Hogan, but TNA didn't have viable action figures until Hogan came along. And if you try to find some of those action figures today, they're very expensive online. Um, when Hogan came, he opened the door for the trading cards. He opened the door for the action figures. He opened the door for the online or cell phone app game TNA Cross the Line and other stuff. I mean, Hogan. I mean, we know what his name means, so you can't knock him. But at the same time, Hogan is going to be about Hogan too, so he's going to get his money, and I think that was a strain as well on on the bottom line of TNA. I know for a fact, and wrestling wise, we just the company was doing well until it started touring. And I do believe not just the touring, I should say, but once they decided to go up against Monday Night Raw, why do that? You have your it's like WCW, when they had their audience and they had their southernness support from the southern crowds. Why start trying to become WWE light? Like just cater to your fans and try to build off of it. And Impact Wrestling had their own fan, and when they went to the Monday nights and tried to make the fans decide, well, obviously we're not going to win against, being in the studio against a mega company like WWE. So why not let their audience come over to us when WWE isn't on? So because when they went to Monday nights, what they did was they showed that we got our tail kicked and then we're going to tuck our tail and we're going to run away. And that wasn't a good look to
mhm,
the wrestling community.
mhm.
However, looking back, no one can call TNA at that time, even at that time, a failure because TNA on a regular Impact was drawing better numbers than AEW is today.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, that
So
gets lost.
that gets lost a lot.
Mhm, mhm. I know you're a very busy man. You're involved in some charity work, so I'm going to limit the content that I have here a little bit and just ask you two more questions, and we'll skip some stuff. Hopefully, in the future, we can have you back again. But I wanted to ask you in 2019 when you were working for Billy Corrigan's NWA, and eventually you won that prestigious television title, which I think and a lot of fans agree is the best looking belt that there ever was. What was your experience with the company then, and did that given who the Hall of Famers that have held that title in the past, how did that make you feel that the company would put the that seal of approval on you?
Well, it meant a lot, obviously. Again, growing up Dusty Rose, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, and the list goes on. It was really, really something, man. It meant the world to me to finally have that title. Obviously, I wanted the 10 pounds of gold. But Billy Corrigan, I've always liked Billy, never had an issue with Billy. Billy has his vision of how he wants NWA to run. I'm just happy in that at that time, Billy knew that I was the best uh, person to, I mean, I can get on there every week and have a match and not, and have a good match and get that title over. Sometimes it's not about the title. Sometimes it's about who the title is on. The title goes to people for three different reasons. One is to get them over. One is because they are over, and the other is to get the title over. I like to think that I got the title over. No knock to Zicky Dice, of course, but I would like to think that I got the title over and the title as well made me that much more. Why wouldn't he have put it on Pope? I'm the only one that came out there that was never had to beg for a reaction, never had to try to. As soon as and so it was a smart move to do. And the only thing they dropped the ball on, if I can say so, Billy, was they did not go with Pope versus Nick Aldis when it was hot, when it
Hmm.
should have happened. You got the two
Hmm.
hottest personalities, two hottest acts on your roster, and you don't go with it. That was a huge mistake.
Hmm. But made for some entertaining product, regardless. My last question to you, Pope, and I do appreciate your time this evening. Again, you're a very busy man. Is Are you familiar with an individual by the name of Jeremy Prophet?
Prophet. Then I just, yeah, I know. Jeremy Prophet talked about him on Post Point of View with Elijah Burke. That's my podcast. Yeah, I've
Hmm.
talked about him. And I'm very familiar with him. We kind of go back a decade or so. Yeah.
Well, he's mentioned you as well, and up until recently, he was our Canadian champion here in Great North Wrestling. But he's not playing by the rules in terms of Great North Wrestling that I sit down as the executive vice president, and I'm wondering if you would be interested in coming into Great North Wrestling in the future to maybe take care of that problem known as Jeremy Prophet for me.
Well, listen, there's a problem even when you mention the name Prophet because when you talk about profit, you talk about the future, and profit and future can't happen when Pope is still around because Pope is present, Pope is still future. And so, yeah, I would love to come up there to Great Northern Wrestling and kind of put profit in his place because he oftentimes try to cross over, if you will, into Pope's lane with all of that profit stuff. And we all know that to be safe when you're out on the road, you need to stay in your own lane. So profit, Pope is going to have to put him, if you will, back in his own lane if given the opportunity.
Well, I would very much be interested in that, and we will have discussions further, especially after he put his hands on me in Smith Falls on July the 15th. And I said this, Jeremy, I'm talking to you, I'm looking at you. You're not going to get away with that without consequences, and I may have a very good consequence for you in the form of the Pope Elijah Burke. But that's for another day. Pope, where can we find you on social media, and do you have any upcoming appearances that you'd like the fans of the Hannibal TV to know about?
Hey, thanks for asking that. First off, let me say this again. The next time we do this, hopefully Pope will be stationary. I'll be in my office, and that way you guys can get all the Pope. I just don't believe in not looking like Pope. And I'm going to be on an interview of such esteem, if you will, with Hannibal TV and have y'all folks screen grabbing and showing me out there to the world looking a mess. Okay, so we'll fix this on the next go round. But be sure to tune in to your boy on a weekly basis every Saturday at 9 a.m. for Pope's Point of View with Elijah Burke. That's wherever your podcast may drop, along with Polo Del Mar of the NWA, of course. And you can follow me on at the Black Pope on Twitter, as well as at the Black Pope or Elijah Burke on Instagram, Elijah Burke on Facebook. And please take a moment or two to go to love-alive.org to learn about Pope's charity, what we do in the community in and around Jacksonville, Florida, giving back to the impoverished and homeless and sheltered individuals. We feed them, not out of brown paper bags, but we feed them from Burger King, man. We clothe them, we give them hygiene products, the list goes on. We just did our huge Great American Clash 3 in Jacksonville, Florida, with JTG, the international superstar Jay Rios, and the list goes on. We gave book bags filled with supplies for the kids to achieve academic success. So please head to Love Dash Alive. You can follow us on at the Love Alive Charity on Twitter, at the Love Alive Charity on Instagram, and at Love Alive Inc. on Facebook. And you can learn all about us as we continue to be the change that we want to see in this world.
Well, Pope, I really appreciate your time. And yes, we will do this again, and we will talk business in the future regarding Great North Wrestling and Jeremy Prophet. But until then, fans, this has been another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter